Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to this special ranty stream I have decided to do just because I'm pissed off with some of the stuff I've been seeing and reading recently about the state of the British Armed Forces and British defence generally. Now, it might be a bit of a ranty stream because it's 1:30 in the morning where I am, and I'm drinking. So, as one sometimes does on a Sunday evening. So, first things first. The thumbnail for this stream was the Royal Navy Carrier Task Group as it set out, which included 2 Royal Navy frigates, 2 Royal Navy air defence destroyers, a couple of Royal Fleet auxiliary supply ships, a Dutch air defence frigate, and an American air defence destroyer. One of those British destroyers had to drop out because its engine's fucked up, which happens fairly frequently with Type 45 destroyers, although the Royal Navy, to give them their due, are now fixing it. But the Royal Navy was due to build 12 of those ships. Then it was reduced to 8 under the vile traitor Tony Blair, and eventually it was reduced to just 6 ships. And many people will call them the best air defense destroyers in the world, and in many respects they are, but there's only 6 of them. And because Tony Blair decided to go with a company that didn't know what it was doing to build their auxiliary generators, they break down all the time. And fixing that is extremely expensive and has only just started. But there we go. More seriously, every single British warship that goes to sea today, every frigate and every destroyer, and let's be clear about this, there are only 17 major British surface escorts, destroyers and frigates, only 17 left today. They all go to sea without any surface-to-surface missile. And in 2022, the main way a warship engages another surface target, i.e. another warship or whatever, is with surface-to-surface missiles. And the British don't have any. They don't even bother taking the old ones we used to have because they're so outdated to sea anymore. And the British government will not pay for a new one. So all of those blokes on British warships who go to sea today, basically if they face an enemy warship, maybe a Chinese warship, for example, they'll be destroyed over the horizon before they come in range of their 4.5-inch gun. This is the truth. But at the same time, Britain is sending thousands of advanced anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles to Ukraine, the very cheapest of which, and much the cheapest of which is the NLAW, which in British service is the MBT law, cost £20,000 a round. And that is the cheapest one. And all of those missiles are coming from British war stocks. And everybody, and I guarantee you this is a fact, everybody with a tiny working brain who's ever served in the British Armed Forces knows very well that British war stocks of all types of ammunition and missiles, etc., are always entirely inadequate. Yet we can send thousands of these things to Ukraine. And it makes no difference to any average British person who runs Ukraine. It's not a vital British interest at all. In no way, shape, or form. But yeah, no, okay. We can fly Ukrainian flags all over the UK. You can't fly a Union flag. You can't fly the Union Jack. You can't fly the St. George's flag because that would make you a racist gammon bastard. But you can certainly fly the Ukrainian flag. People in Britain need to start waking up, and they need to start waking up really quickly. Now, I don't want to make this about Ukraine particularly, because, like, Ukraine, according to the United Nations, which is Globo Homo Central, is probably one of the most corrupt nations in Europe. Far more corrupt than Russia, for example. But yeah, Ukraine, now they're the center of our, in inverted commas, democracy. I mean, what a load of bollocks, frankly. But there we go. I want to put this on British defence. In 1982, at the time of the Falklands War, the British Army was about 175,000 men, and the British Army had about 1,100 main battle tanks. Today, in 2024, in March, the British Army is 80,000 men at most, and it really isn't because it's under-recruited. And we have under 250 main battle tanks, including reserves. So let me just repeat that for anyone who's a bit dumb or stupid on the uptake. 1982, British Army, 175,000 men, 1,100 main battle tanks. 2022, British Army under 80,000 strong, less than 250 main battle tanks. Adi Mantis, no. The British Army is supposed to be 82,000 strong, but it's under-recruited. It's about 80,000. And that, by the way, includes about 4,000 Gurkha soldiers. And far, far, far too many women. It includes every cook and bottle washer in the British Army, and far too many women, many of whom are in roles to which they are entirely unsuited. The Royal Navy in 1982 had 70 frigates and destroyers. 70. Today, the Royal Navy has a total of 17 destroyers and frigates. Also in 1982, the Royal Navy had at least 12 SSN nuclear-powered hunter-killer submarines. Today, the Royal Navy has 6. Now, you may say the Royal Navy now has 2 very large aircraft carriers, and you would be correct in that. But when the British Carrier Task Force put to sea and sailed through the South China Sea, etc., recently, and weren't allowed to land anywhere because of this crap about the China virus, which nearly caused a mutiny on many ships, Britain sent that Carrier Task Force to sea with 8 actually British F-35B fast jets and 10 American Marine Corps fast jets. A disgusting position. Now, those ships are officially supposed to be able to carry at least 36 F-35Bs, although from what I've read, they really could carry 70. But the idea that Britain could ever afford to put 70 fast jets on one of these ships at the price of the F-35B is ridiculous, because they never will. But we don't even have half one full air wing to put on those ships. And by the way, in case anyone wants to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, my son is a serving officer in the Fleet Air Arm, which is standing up its first F-35B squadron this year. So you've got Royal Navy surface warships going to sea with no real way of fighting other surface warships. You've got carriers going to sea with not even a quarter of their proper air wings. And you've got Boris Johnson turning around and saying, oh, okay, we're going to send thousands upon thousands of British war stock weapons, because they all come from the entirely inadequate British war stocks, to Ukraine to go and fight the Ruskies for some unknown reason. Because who the fuck cares who won? Who runs Ukraine? Really, who does? It makes no bloody difference to UK whether Ukraine is run by Russia or Ukraine. No difference at all. And Minoan, USA to defend the Isle. Fuck that shit. Britain can only defend herself. Hang on. In fact, I've got a good example of this. Let me play you guys a tune.
Oh, Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. Britons never, never, never shall be slaves. Off the coast of Argentina, our island midst the deep, with 1,800 people and 500,000 sheep. The day they were invaded, everybody learned the name. A barren little colony and got a bit of fame. We stocked our ships full of British beer and bullets, mobilised the navy and we called up the Marines. We sailed 2 weeks till we reached the Falkland Islands, so we could teach a lesson to those bloody Argentines. Maggie Thatcher was awakened in the middle of the night. She heard the Argentinians was calling for a fight. She summoned up her cabinet and met with the MPs and sent the pride of Britain to the stormy southern seas. We stocked our ships full of British beer and bullets. We mobilised the navy and we called up the Marines. We sailed 2 weeks till we reached the Falkland Islands, so we could teach a lesson to those bloody Argentines. Well, in came the Yanks, who had to have a say, so they sent Al Haig down Buenos Aires way. He shuffled to and fro, always managing to smile. The artist still refused to leave the barren British Isle. So we stocked our ships full of British beer and bullets. We mobilised the navy and we called up the Marines. We sailed 2 weeks till we reached the Falkland Islands, so we could teach a lesson to those bloody Argentines. Well, the whole world watched as the British fleet drew near, and the battle for the Falklands was finally here. We sank their ships, brought down our aeroplane, and taught those cheeky archers not to mess with us again. We stocked our ships full of British beer and bullets, mobilised the navy and we called up the Marines. We sailed 2 weeks till we reached the Falkland Islands, so we could teach a lesson to those bloody Argentines. All the local girls were waiting when Prince Andy disembarked. He had a reputation that he liked to have a lock. They covered him with kisses, they walked him in the grass. He said he never saw a better piece of British land. So we stocked our ships full of British beer and bullets. We mobilised the navy and we called up the Marines. We sailed 2 weeks till we reached the Falkland Islands, so we could teach a lesson to those bloody Argentines. We stocked our ships full of British beer and bullets. We mobilised the navy and we called up the Marines. We sailed 2 weeks till we reached the South Atlantic, so we could teach a lesson to those bloody Argentines. Go on, clear out of it! Go on back to the Pampers! Go on, clear out!
And of course, that was a humorous song, by the way, guys. But ultimately, the only way the British took back the Falkland Islands was by using our own armed forces. No one else gave us any forces. You think the EU were going to give Britain any forces? Were the Americans going to give any British forces? No, they were not. In the end, in this world, as it really is, not as like silly lefty liberals would like to pretend, everything is about force and power. And if you don't have any force and you don't have any power, you can't do anything. Now, let me explain something to you guys. The British land forces in the Falkland Islands were all three of the Royal Marine Commandos, which is basically 3 battalions in infantry terms. It was 2 out of the 3 British Parachute Regiment battalions. And they also sent a Gurkha battalion and 2 Guards battalions down there, plus a small 2 troops of light armor and more than a regiment of artillery. So it was basically an infantry division. The British Army cannot deploy an infantry division anymore. We just don't have enough forces to deploy an infantry division. Britain has an ambition to be able to deploy a division, which would be mixed because that's all they could do these days, but they can't do it now. 2, all right. So first of all, Royal Marines, the three Royal Marine Commandos, one of them is no longer a full Royal Marine Commando. It's used to like go on ships and stuff like that. You wouldn't be able to send them to a battle like the Falklands and have a full battalion-sized unit. There's only 2 now rather than 3. Parachute Regiment, exactly the same thing, because one of the Parachute Regiment battalions is now the SF support unit, the Special Forces support unit, and it's not a full battalion anymore. Again, we can't do that. You can't send down 2 troops of like armored vehicles anymore because the British have now got the wonderful Ajax. An Ajax is enormously large, enormously heavy, and doesn't work, despite the British Army spending millions and millions on it. It's huge compared to something like oh Christ, what are they called? Sabres and what have you. You know, these little light tanks that the Brits used to have for reconnaissance. The Ajax is enormous compared with them, and also so heavy that the RAF have almost no aircraft that can carry one, even one. And as I said, they don't work anyway. There's so much vibration that the crew can't fire their weapons properly. And Britain has got hundreds of these crappy things which could never stand up to a main battle tank. They would just die immediately. Their main weapons are 40mm automatic cannon. And their armor is nowhere near as thick as a main battle tank. They are basically useless. And they've cost millions because the British Army doesn't know what it's doing. British Army today has never been weaker since going right back to when it was really formed when Charles II became king. Even when Charles II became king, the British Army, relatively speaking, was more powerful than it is today. The British Army today is entirely useless. And I don't mean, I was a British soldier. All my family were British soldiers going back to my great-great-grandfather. So I don't say this lightly, but the British Army today is entirely useless. And if you go and watch Forces TV on YouTube, it's actually British Forces TV, but it's called Forces TV. It is at least as bad and in many respects worse than the biased brainwashing corporation, you know, the BBC. It is anti-British, it is anti-white, and it is anti-man. Every single thing they do on there is about women's body armor because, you know, women shouldn't need special body armor because they should not be in frontline roles. They don't belong in frontline roles in any of the military. They're no good at it. They're crap at it. They shouldn't be there. But you'll get stuff like that. You'll get about every single thing you'll see about the Royal Navy will have women all over the place. Again, this is funny, you see. You can, I don't know if it's still on YouTube. YouTube's probably got rid of it. But there used to be a show on UK about becoming a Royal Navy officer on one of the terrestrial channels in UK. And they followed all these people. And the women, when it came to doing damage control, the Royal Navy has 1 or maybe even 2 really expensive damage control simulators, whereby you go into this machine and you get thousands of gallons of freezing cold salt water hitting you, and you have to somehow stop this leak, you know, with wooden plugs and all the rest of it, which is what the Navy still use. And the women invariably end up in a corner just crying, useless. And if the leak gets stopped at all, it's stopped by the blokes. Always happens. When the women do the very weak land survival and camping and kind of tactical courses that the Navy does, and they are very weak because they're for the Navy, The only way the women get through those is because the blokes help them. You know, they'll carry their packs. They'll help them put up their tents. They'll stop them crying when they're crying, which they frequently are, because that's what women do. You know, guys, anyone's known women, you know that's what they do. But women can be the captains of ships. And indeed, I think there is one woman captain of a ship in the Royal Navy today. My son wouldn't want to be on a warship, and nor would I. In fact, that would be the one warship in the Royal Navy I would not want to be on. Women cannot do that shit. Sorry, we're not all the same. But, you know, it's again, you're not allowed to say that. One reason I'm anonymous is if my son was at least associated with me saying that, his career at best would just stop, and at worst he'd get discharged, because you're not allowed to say it, even though it's the absolute truth. The British Army in the 1990s did tests with all male sections. The section is like what the Americans call a squad. It's like 8 to 10 blokes. They did tests with all male sections, all female sections, and mixed sections. The men invariably vastly outperformed the other two. Then they went on and did the same thing with platoons. 3 platoons. Sorry, platoon is 3 sections. So it's like 30, 35 blokes. They did the same thing. All male, mixed, all female. And again, the all male platoons vastly outperformed the other two. So this is, and I know that the US Marine Corps did exactly the same thing, by the way, and with exactly the same results. Women do not belong in frontline roles in the military. They just don't. You know, the feminists will tell you that any Tom, Dick, or Harry bloke can beat the shit out of his wife or girlfriend because, you know, domestic violence and all this, right? Well, if that is true, and I'm not arguing it isn't, I think it is if you're a big enough arsehole. But, and often a supposed male feminist, by the way. But if that's true, what are they doing in the military? You can't have it both ways. If women are useless and can't stop themselves being beaten up by skinny little soy boys and bugmen, which they can't, according to feminists, then why are they in the military? You know, because a bullet in the face or a bayonet in the guts or a rifle butt on the back of your head might upset you a bit if you're a girl. I'm sorry, it makes me angry. But you're not allowed to even talk about it. The Israeli Defense Force reports female combat soldiers suffering injury, training at twice the rate of males. Robert Verlinden, absolutely. They always do that. That's true in Britain. It's also true in America. And also, Israel is sometimes used an example of where women were fighting. No, they weren't. The Israeli military was always careful not to put women in frontline military roles. It's not to say they didn't put them in places where they could get killed, because that's not the same thing, but they didn't make them infantry soldiers or armored soldiers or someone on an Israeli patrol boat or something like that. They didn't do that. But yeah, the women always get injured at twice the rate. I remember I did a stream with Donna Pleb, and Don pointed out to me that there was a US Marine Corps rear echelon unit that was going to deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan. And just before they did, like 80% of their women soldiers supposedly were pregnant. And of course, you can't deploy if you're pregnant. But again, we keep getting told, no, women can do everything men can. No, they fucking can't. I'm 57 years of age in, like, I don't know, a few days, shall we say. And I guarantee you I could scare 95% of women shitless if I was arsehole enough to want to. Guarantee it. So they don't belong in the frontline forces of the military. They don't. There's things they can do. They can do lots of clerical jobs. They can be nurses. They can even be doctors and things like that. But they do not belong in frontline military forces. And the only reason we're putting them there is because Globo Homo wants us to. And Globo Homo is our enemy. It doesn't matter if you're American or you're British, if you're Australian, if you're some European nation. Globo Homo, if you're a white guy, is your enemy. They want you gone and destroyed. Bolero 393. I have yelled at my share of feminists over the years, trust me. And not one of them stood their ground. Because they can't. Because they're girls, you know. 100-pound woman cries, kills, can beat any man. Yeah, right. Okay, I believe it. Only in Hollywood fantasy. But apparently they couldn't beat, what was that guy's name? The really fat, ugly producer guy. I can't remember what his name was now. They couldn't beat him. They used to give him blowjobs, apparently, because that was how they got jobs. But, you know, that was because he forced them. Because women are never adults, you understand? It doesn't matter if a woman sleeps with you and whatever she does, she can change her mind the next day because she ain't an adult, you see. According to feminists. The Fed Post and Weinstein, that's the bloke I was talking about. But feminism is always about this. It does not matter. Women are never adults. They can't do what blokes do and just make bad choices sometimes. They are allowed to change their mind and say, oh no, you victimized me. It's bollocks. And that's another reason they can't be in the armed forces. You know, when I joined the army, our famous saying was, if you can't take a joke, you shouldn't have joined. You know, that's a typical armed forces thing. It's like, you know, everything is a fuck up. It always is. Think about it, you know. Robert Verlinden, women suffer stress fractures, their fucking brains break. Yeah, of course they do. And they can't even carry the weight that men carry. Like, most people don't realize the huge amount of weight that a modern infantry soldier, and when I say infantry soldier, I mean obviously infantry, but also someone who is a parachute regiment, someone who is in the Rangers in America, or someone who's a Marine. The huge amount of weight that you are expected to carry as an infantry soldier today, women just can't do it. And they certainly can't do it for long. What? Why would you have women pilots of carrier aircraft? You know, well, I mean, just why? It's not like there's a shortage of blokes who want to be carrier pilots. There isn't. Claire Core says most women have no sense of humor. Most women don't have much of a sense of humor, in all honesty. That's why there's no such thing as a female comedian. All they can do is go on about feminism and blokes. They're not funny at all, because most women do not have any sense of humor. You can make a woman laugh, but it ain't really because she's got a sense of humor. I'm speaking as like a relatively experienced bloke who's known quite a lot of women. But, you know. But yeah, all right. So let me get back to what our real subject. Britain supposedly at the moment spends 2.2% of GDP on defense. But it's a lie, because I'm not sure if it was Tony Blair or Cameron, there's not much to choose between either of them. It was changed so that British defense spending now includes all British military pensions and war widows' pensions, going right the way back to World War II, because we still have some people alive from then. And that is, I'd say it was easily 20 to 25% of that budget. So we don't spend 2.2% or even close to it on defense, really. Now, the minimum amount that Britain should spend on defense is 3%, but it needs to be a real 3% without that nonsense of all military pensions and war widows' pensions being included in the budget. Because obviously money that goes to those people, much as they deserve it, is not defense spending. It's money you owe people. So yeah, Britain 3% is the absolute minimum Britain should spend on defence, and with a 3% real spend minus the MOD pensions, you would be looking at easily being able to afford a 25-ship British destroyer and frigate fleet rather than the 17 we have today. And everyone I know regards that as an absolute minimum size for the Royal Navy. You would be able to afford at least one full carrier air wing or 36 fast jets for one of the carriers at least, although we really need two. And you might even be able to afford 10 rather than 6 British SSN nuclear-powered hunter-killer submarines. And like, you know, if you're going to look at Russia and what's going on in Ukraine with horror, and I don't, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't care if Russia runs Ukraine. Ukraine is like, you know, it was only created in the 1920s by the Soviet Union. It is not this wonderful place that people are trying to pretend at all. But if you're going to look at it and you're going to look at the vulnerability of Britain today, then spend more money on our own defense. Robert Verlinden in the chat is saying, carriers are stupid anyway. Nah, sorry, don't agree with you. Don't agree with you at all, mate. I think you're totally wrong about that. Would we be better with 3 carriers rather than 2? Yes. But what I would rather see happen is eventually I would like to see HMS Albion and Bulwark, which are the 2 Royal Navy amphibious assault ships, replaced by 2 ships rather like the Australian Canberra class that can also operate as flight decks. So that in effect, Britain would have 4 flight decks. Admittedly, they couldn't carry anywhere near as many F-35Bs as HMS Queen Elizabeth and Prince Wales, but they could certainly carry somewhere between 6 and 12. And that would then give a little bit more flexibility. But yeah, that's what I would like to see actually happen with the Royal Navy. Whether we will or not, I don't know. I mean, look, I could go on about Alexander Johnson and his insane net zero. That's going to see British old people dying every year because they can't afford to heat their own homes and eat, when it's combined with what's going on with the sanctions against Russia. But, you know, maybe common sense will prevail. But this was the main reason I wanted to do this stream. British defences have never been weaker. Now, I am no great expert on the crabs, which is to say the Royal Air Force. I'm no great expert on them at all, but I do know that they have suffered pretty much in line with the British Army and the Royal Navy, and they are weaker than they've ever been as well. If there is no such thing as international law. International law is what the most powerful countries in the world are willing to enforce. All there really is power and force. You don't have power, you don't have force, you got no standing, you can't do anything. Minoan, yeah, I mean, you know, I don't care about Ukraine. Really, I don't. It's not a vital British interest. I wouldn't send them a second-hand pair of British Army boots, frankly, because I don't care who runs Ukraine. Lumber in the chat, NHS budget could pay for 200 Vanguard class. Well, yeah, but Vanguard class are nuclear missile subs, so I don't think we need 200 of those. I would say this, like 80% of the British budget goes on three things. It goes on the National Health Service, which mostly wastes that money, particularly on admin people. It goes on welfare payments, many of which go to immigrants who only just arrived in the country, and it goes on old age pensions. That's 80% of the British budget. The NHS wastes in a month, or roughly a month, more than Britain actually spends on defence in a year. And at least half that money goes to admin people. It's got nothing to do with medicine whatsoever. Why would you want 200 nuclear missile submarines, for God's sake? You don't need that. Britain works on the basis of 4, and that is enough to take out Moscow and St. Petersburg and Peking, Beijing, as people call it these days, and like any of our other major enemies, and that's fine. That's all you need. And you're only ever going to use that if someone's going to do it to you, or if you're facing an invasion you can't fight back, and it's the very last resort. 4's plenty. I actually would like to take the British nuclear strategic deterrent out of the regular defence budget and stick it in the Foreign Office budget, because that's where it really belongs. It's not something that's going to get used very often, if at all, hopefully. It's a last defense or a last fuck you. And trust me, if I was in charge and Britain was going to lose completely and be taken over, I'd use it too. I would say fuck you. And that's its real use. And above that, of course, to stop someone else using nuclear missiles on you. You got them and you can reply, they're not going to use them on you, hopefully. Although I've seen so many morons, particularly on the left recently, saying, oh, yes, let's have a nuclear war. Not everyone will die. Yeah, only 6 billion out of 8. Okay, then. That's not even true, Robert Villeneuve. Not true at all. UK could do it, but it would cost more money. UK could absolutely build their own missiles start to finish. We have done so in the past. But it would cost more money, so what's the point? So yeah, as I said, come back to the beginning. 1982, British Army, 175,000 men, 1,100 main battle tanks. Royal Navy, 70 frigates and destroyers, and about 12 SSN nuclear-powered hunter-killer submarines. Today, British Army, less than 80,000 men, less than 250 main battle tanks, i.e. useless in almost anything you can think of. And the Royal Navy, a whole 17 destroyers and frigates and 6 SSN nuclear-powered hunter-killer submarines, which are great. The British Astute-class submarines are great, but 7 of them is just not enough, which is the ultimate aim. We've got 6 at the moment, but eventually it will be 7. It should be absolute bare minimum of 10, and the Royal Navy needs an absolute bare minimum of 25 destroyers and frigates, not 17. And in the meantime, I'd stop giving away our very expensive war stocks to Ukraine for no purpose, because Ukraine ain't going to win that war. Russia's going to win it for sure. It's just a matter of how quickly they are going to do it. And unlike, say, the USA in World War II, for example, the Brits aren't doing Lend-Lease with Ukraine. They're not saying, oh, no, you've got to pay us out of war. They're just giving them to them. And like I said, much the cheapest of these British weapons that are being given to Ukraine, £20,000 a pop. many of which the Russians are capturing unfired. But yeah, just keep giving them weapons, just keep giving them money. One of the most corrupt countries in Europe. And I don't care who runs Ukraine. It's of no interest to any average British or Western person. But I tell you what we will care about is the enormous price hikes coming down the line on energy, on petrol, and on food. Ukraine and Russia between them, for example, produce 30% of the world's wheat. And that's to say nothing when you're talking about things like fertilizer, which is essential these days, and things like nickel and lots of other stuff that Russia builds and makes and pulls out of the ground. All of these sanctions are actually going to hurt us worse than they're going to hurt Russia in the end. We are going to have elderly people dying every winter because they can't afford to heat their homes. And that is going to be made vastly worse by these green wanks, watermelon green, because they're green on the outside, but socialist red on the inside. These green watermelon wanks who want net zero and all this climate change shit. Because you cannot store any of this so-called green energy, and it's totally inefficient, and you're going to get brownouts all the time because you can't store it. And the one clean energy that would be good, nuclear power stations, all these greenies are against. But yeah, as I said, look, it's been a bit all over the place, but it just makes me really angry that you've got someone like Putin, who you may or may not like, but he broadly acts in Russia and Russians' self-interest. You can't say that at all about a senile pedophile like Biden or a cuck, a fat cuck like Alexander Johnson, who listens to what his wife says. Who's a very average thought, basically. But the Johnson and Biden don't act in the interests of real British and American people. Not at all. They don't. If you flew a Union flag or a St. George's flag on many places where people are flying Ukraine flags today, you would get slagged off as racist. But Ukraine flag, oh, that's all right. People have got to start waking up, guys. Our leaders today are anti our real people in the West. They are anti our real people. Anyway, that's probably all I've got to say. Like I said, Britain needs to spend a minimum 3%, a real 3%, minus all of the military and war widows' pensions, actually on defence. And if we did that, we probably just about barely have enough to look after ourselves. All right, so that's all I had to say on that stuff. I do have a new stream coming up on the 22nd of this month with Don the Pleb on his channel, which is going to be about the military and women in the military and why they're doing this bollocks to us and fucking up what used to be pretty good militaries on the whole. And of course, I'll be back next Saturday evening UK time, Sunday morning Australian time, with a splendid isolation stream. So go well, folks, and I'll see you then.